Welcome back everyone watching. Right now I'm in Simi Valley, California, and today I'm going to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. Presidential libraries are basically museums of a particular president and their administration, preserving history through archives and artifacts.
This one right ahead of us?
Every president since Herbert Hoover, who was president from 1929 to 1933, has a presidential library that are made after their presidency ends. And the libraries are in the president's home states. For me personally, I think a presidential museum would be a better name for it. But regardless of the name, they are very cool places for presidential history buffs like myself. Ronald Reagan was a very popular president, and this museum is quite huge and impressive. Reagan won the presidency from Jimmy Carter on November 4th, 1980, and he served as the American president until January 20th, 1989. On the drive going up to it, I noticed these banners hanging from the street lights, and right away I picked up that it's every American president in order. I can see that one's Andrew Jackson, so that means the next ones would be Martin Van Buren, followed by William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James K. Polk, Zachary Taylor, and so on. I believe I start naming them out before we get to them. It's a cool touch. I like the way they did that. They have a similar thing in Rapid City, South Dakota with statues of almost all the presidents. Basically anyone whose presidency is over, I believe.
They're all in order. Should be Buchanan. Next one should be Lincoln.
In 1,000 feet, enter the traffic circle.
Next one should be Johnson. Next one should be Grant. Next one should be Hayes. Next one should be Garfield. Next one should be Chester A. Arthur. Where's the next one? There should be Chester A. Arthur. Oh, you missed one? He's not next. Definitely not. George Bush is not next. I can promise you next is Chester A. Arthur. I bet my life on that.
They might just went around. Oh yeah, the
Going back-
other way.
going back down the other way.
Yeah.
So bottom line.
I think we're getting a preview of our trip back.
McKinley, Roosevelt. Yep. The next one should be Taft. Yep. Next one should be Wilson. Next one should be Coolidge. Oh, Harding, excuse me. Harding and Coolidge. This should be Herbert Hoover. This should be Roosevelt. That's Truman. Where's Roosevelt at? I skipped him too.
This is not it.
Reagan.
And now, despite an extremely noisy bus, we have made it to the front. Here's a statue of the man himself, greeting you as you come into the front doors. This is where you buy your ticket and where the museum begins. I can promise you also that this will not be the only time you see a statue, painting, or photograph of Ronald Reagan here. Well, I just bought my ticket, and here is where the Presidential Museum begins, starting with the Presidential Seal. Here's a statue of President Reagan along with his wife, Nancy Reagan. Along with this quote from President Reagan, the eternal optimist. America's best days are yet to come. Our proudest moments are yet to be. Our most glorious achievements are just ahead. Just around the corner from that, you come to this holographic presentation by President Reagan.
We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare.
Here are a couple of chairs that were used by President Reagan and Pope John Paul II.
In 1911. Yeah, you were not born then. That's it. Look at him, he's a smart. He plays football.
Ronald Reagan was born in 1911 and grew up in Illinois. In 1932, he became a sportscaster in Iowa after graduating from college. He moved to California in 1937, where he became a well-known movie star. He didn't get involved in politics until much later.
Ronald Reagan saw his family, neighbors working hard.
Coming up shortly ahead on the right is the General Electric Theater, where you can watch films that Ronald Reagan was in.
35 cents an hour.
In 1964, Ronald Reagan made an impassioned and famous speech, one of the most famous and popular speeches of his career. The speech was called A Time for Choosing, and it really propelled him into a political superstar. It was in support of the Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater for president, who was running against Lyndon B. Johnson. 2 years later, in 1964, Reagan would become governor of California and turn the state deficit into a state surplus. And here you can see some memorabilia from some of Reagan's most famous Hollywood movies, including perhaps his most famous movie, Newt Rockne. Reagan played college football player George Gipp, who played for the University of Notre Dame. After that movie, and for the rest of his life, the Gipper became a nickname for President Reagan. The phrase, "win one for the Gipper," from the movie was used during his political career. Here they're playing the speech I was just referring to, A Time for Choosing.
Now we're told that 9.3 million families in this country are poverty-stricken and the base is earning less than $3,000 a year. Welfare spending 10 times greater than it was in the dark depths of the Depression. We're spending $45 million on welfare. $4,600 a year.
Because of Reagan's background as a sportscaster and as a Hollywood star, he was a great speaker, and another one of his nicknames was the Great Communicator. Here you can listen to different Reagan radio addresses.
Governor Reagan wasted no time honoring the second part of his promise to voters, making California a better place to live.
Every day it saves 16,000 barrels of oil.
While in office, Governor Reagan
In the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "You don't know how lucky we are."
But to me, none was more serious than the fact America lost faith in itself.
Good evening. The world's oil consumers today reacted with dismay and anger over the decision by the
This part is about Reagan's victory in 1980 over Jimmy Carter. One of his most famous lines from the election was, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" That became a popular phrase as the country had high inflation of over 13% and high unemployment. It was called stagflation, and the economy was in tatters. Interest rates were sky high as well, and the American dream seemed out of reach for most people. Because of the instability in the Middle East, gas prices soared and there were long lines to get gas. And many people blame President Carter for the Iran hostage crisis, where the Shah of Iran was ousted, the American embassy was taken over, and the Americans were taken hostage for 444 days until the day Reagan was sworn into office. In addition, the Soviet Union had just invaded Afghanistan, and Carter boycotted the 1980 Moscow Olympics. For many Americans, the country felt like it was in deep turmoil. And Reagan did a very good job of communicating this with the American people and getting his very optimistic message about the future out. It led to him becoming one of the most popular presidents in history and winning re-election by winning every single state except for one in the 1984 election. winning the final Electoral College vote total of 525 votes for Ronald Reagan and 13 votes for Walter Mondale. Now this room has got a podium where you can read one of Reagan's speeches off the teleprompter there. It's also got some of Reagan's speeches from early in his presidency, as well as the outfits worn to his inauguration by President Reagan and First Lady Nancy, as well as other documents such as an inaugural ball invitation and his inaugural address.
Senator Hatfield, Mr. Chief Justice, Mr. President, Vice President Bush, Vice President Mondale, Senator Reagan. Oh my gosh, it's so fast. We're not, as some would have us believe, doomed to have an inevitable decline. I do not believe in a fate that will fall on us no matter what.
Reagan wore this when he took the oath of office, January 20th, 1981. And Nancy wore this.
Stand up here. All right, Kai, stand there, I'll take your picture. Yeah, this is like the president. You're standing like...
Let me know if you have any questions.
So this is at the podium. You see they put the words backwards here.
Do you have their Air Force?
And that's how it
Okay, well, welcome.
reflects into the here.
Well, you know, I'm a Navy veteran, so I only know Marine Corps jokes. I don't have an Air Force joke.
Oh, there is no Air Force joke.
Everybody else is a joke. Oh, good one. You said.
The tour continues through there and to the Oval Office and the Air Force One and all that.
Oh, we've been that way, so we need to go back.
This area is about the scary events of March 30th, 1981, very early into his presidency, when John Hinckley attempted to assassinate President Reagan and shot him getting into the presidential limo in Washington, D.C.
You already got that. He's already.
You're going the right direction.
I owe my life to God. We're trying to serve you. I can't.
This is incredible. This is the blue suit that Ronald Reagan was wearing for the first time when he was shot. You can actually see the bullet hole and the blood on the suit. They cut it off of him on the operating table to save his life at George Washington University Hospital. Reagan lost over half of his blood, and the bullet was just an inch from his heart. But Dr. Aaron Benjamin was able to successfully remove the bullet and save his life. Reagan was always a funny guy, and even knowing it might be his last words, quipped to the doctors, "Please tell me you're all Republicans." One of the doctors replied, "Today, Mr. President, we're all Republicans." His last words to his wife were also a joke. He told Nancy, "Honey, I forgot to duck," an old line from the boxer Jack Dempsey. This is the second draft of Reagan's handwritten letter to Soviet leader Brezhnev. And here is a replica of the White House Oval Office, the way it was decorated when President Reagan was there. And one of the museum workers now was telling the story of how the Resolute desk in the Oval Office came to be.
How do you do the next one? There's one in Washington, one that Queen Victoria kept for herself.
Oh, that was a gift from England.
Yes. Yeah, because the Resolute, why is it called Resolute?
I never
Okay, some people call it the Hayes desk, after Rutherford B. Hayes.
Okay.
When Queen Victoria, after the U.S., she had a flotilla of British ships in the northern hemisphere, and they got stuck in the ice. They abandoned the ships. One of them was the HMS Resolute, which when it thawed out, was not shipworthy to go back to England. A U.S. whaling ship found it, made it shipworthy, sent it back to Queen Victoria. When it was decommissioned, she took wood from the ship and made two desks. One she kept for herself, and one she gave to President Hayes. So that's why it's either called the Resolute desk or the Hayes desk.
I didn't know.
Eisenhower would have had to have 4 flags.
What's that?
I said Eisenhower would have had to have 4 flags. We went from 48 states to 50 states.
Okay.
Here's a little interactive touchscreen built into the table where you can explore what it's like to attend a state dinner at the White House. And this next room is all dedicated to First Lady Nancy Reagan. Here they've got some of her baby clothes and items from her school days.
Thank you for your love. And thank you for just being you.
I think they both found each other. The missing part. He was good at what she wasn't. She was good at what he wasn't.
Over here is some of her jewelry. And then over here, some of her dresses.
Dear First Lady, as President of the United States, it's my honor and privilege to cite you for service above and beyond the call of duty.
And now we're going to go out this exit and down the hall to where the Air Force One is kept. This area we are headed to now is called Air Force One Pavilion. Air Force One is just one of the highlights kept in this area, but it definitely has to be the biggest highlight, both literally and figuratively. Air Force One is sometimes called the Flying White House. This particular Air Force One served 7 American presidents from 1973 until 2001. That would be Presidents Nixon, Carter, Ford, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, and George W. Bush. We will go down below there and see them better, but if you're wondering what's down below, that's part of the presidential motorcade, and Marine One, the president's helicopter. Over here is like a series of glass walls that are kind of flight trackers that shows each year and how many miles he traveled on Air Force One. And if you're wondering, this plane flew President Reagan over 660,000 miles to 26 foreign countries and 46 states. Well, there you go. Now that's some frequent flyer miles. Here he is traveling to some different countries. I would say Indonesia, Russia, the Soviet Union back then, China. Here is a wall dedicated to the Secret Service, the agency dedicated to protecting the president.
Press people, communications people, security people. It gets to be quite an involved part of our planning. It really is picking up the White House and moving it someplace else in the world. Since the advent of the Intercontinental
that brought presidential travel into the jet age. But it was First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy who decided the red exterior paint scheme was not at all presidential. The exterior design is called the livery. The biggest livery.
That reaches out and touches one of
All right, after a quick picture in front, now it's time to go in Air Force One.
Welcome to Air Force One. How was it? Like it? Between the seats you see a black suitcase. That's what they call the football. It contains the nuclear codes that have to be with the president at all times.
These would be the nuclear codes down here. And that's the communication center where the president could call all over the world.
First office, this is the president.
And this is called the first office. This is the president's quarters.
Unless it was that movie Air Force One. That doesn't really happen. Hello.
Hi.
I'd only be afraid if it was a Simpson on The Simpsons. Oh, right, that's right.
Yeah, had me fooled for a second. I thought there's somebody
No,
sitting there.
you're not the first one. And they look and then they kind of jump. And one thing the military aide does, part of their job, is they hold the suitcase. You hope you never have to use that case, but you have to be prepared, I guess. So this would be presidents, aides, secretaries.
Well, that was really cool. A real piece of history. Now let's go check out some of the presidential motorcade vehicles that are here. First up is this Secret Service Chevrolet Silverado. You can see parked behind the presidential limousine next to Air Force One in this photo from 1987. As I'm passing by, if you can notice the license plate on the next one, it says Gipper. This is the 1983 Cadillac presidential limousine that became Reagan's presidential limousine in 1984. I should note, this is not the limousine he was getting into when he got shot. That is located at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. I previously made a video showing that, but this is the limousine used mostly in the second half of his presidency and a little of the first half. This is a Los Angeles police car and motorcycle, the kind that would be used in Reagan's motorcade when he would come back home and to Los Angeles. This is a 1980s era LAPD Chevrolet Impala here. And now we go further down to see this Marine One, the presidential helicopter. I should note that this is not the Marine One that Ronald Reagan used. This is a Sikorsky VH-3A that went into service in 1962 and became Marine One in 1967. This one was President Lyndon B. Johnson's Marine One. Perhaps someday they will be able to get the one used for President Reagan, but this is still cool to see. The Marine One helicopters are mainly used for flying the president short distances, often from the White House lawn to the Air Force One airfield. And now we get the privilege to take a peek inside here as well. Well, it's a good thing they have that presidential seal on the back of the seat. Otherwise, it could get confusing. Excuse me, is this the 3 o'clock Washington, D.C. air tour book for Harold and Bev? Now let's go outside for a minute and take a peek at the beautiful Simi Valley. And if you look closely at the glass, you can see me in the valley. It's a pretty day, but it is a bit nippy out here. There are a number of dining options at the Reagan Presidential Library. Probably none of them are as cool as this one, which unfortunately is closed right now. I guess I'm a little too late in the day, but it's still cool to see it. On a 1984 trip to Ireland, Reagan visited his ancestral hometown and visited O'Farrell's pub to give a speech. After that, O'Farrell's changed the name of their pub to Ronald Reagan Pub, and it stayed under that name for the rest of its existence. In 2004, the entire pub was taken down and shipped and reassembled at the Reagan Presidential Library, and here it stays. Many of the items inside are original from the pub in Ireland, so this is a pretty cool piece of history, shipped right here directly from Ireland. So that was the very cool Air Force One pavilion. Let's move on now to the room with the giant Berlin Wall replica and some of the men and countries Reagan had ideological battles with, most notably the Soviet Union.
It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is stronger and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to?
So in my opinion, Reagan's two most famous and most popular speeches are the one I mentioned earlier, called A Time for Choosing from 1964, and his June 12, 1987 speech at the Berlin Wall. We welcome change and openness, for we believe that freedom and security go together, that the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And many historians believe that speech and Reagan's policies laid the groundwork for the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of East and West Germany and the fall of the Soviet Union just a few years later, effectively ending the Cold War without a single bullet being fired. This is the uniform of an East German border guard stationed at the Berlin Wall.
East meets West, as a handshake bridges 16,000 miles and 22 years of hostility.
The United States will meet with the superpowers and seek to relax tension.
We make no secret that we see détente as a way to create more favorable conditions for the communist construction.
The Soviet army outnumbers ours more than 2-1. Their strategic nuclear missiles are larger, more powerful, and more numerous than ours. The evidence mounts that we're number 2 in a world where it's dangerous, if not fatal, to be second best.
The Soviet Union is moving to solidify control in neighboring Afghanistan.
Their largest show of force since the communist invasion of Czechoslovakia. The airmen thousands of soldiers will come the area.
If they maintain their dominance over Afghanistan, we change.
As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it, now or ever.
In the last room, you saw a number of men that Reagan would have considered political adversaries and challenges, such as the Ayatollah Khomeini, Fidel Castro, Yasser Arafat, Muammar Gaddafi, and more. This was one of Reagan's key beliefs as well, one of his mottos, peace through strength. He believed that if America had the world's strongest military, then it would be less likely to have to go to war, because someone is much more likely to want to fight someone they can beat up easily than they are someone that can beat them up.
Oh, excuse me.
It is in the name of eternal humanity that we have today performed our momentous deed.
Here is Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev.
President Gorbachev and I signed regional ratification papers putting the INF agreement into force.
They came to respect each other.
probably even like each other.
Here is the INF treaty that Reagan and Gorbachev signed in 1987 to reduce nuclear weapons in both countries. By 1991, the two countries had destroyed almost 2,700 missiles.
It is easy to forget what the world was like in the spring of 1981.
This is the suit that President Reagan wore when he gave his famous speech at the Berlin Wall, where he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," standing directly in front of the Brandenburg Gate.
He asks his advisors to develop a technology that would act as a defensive shield against incoming missiles. It was known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, and is one aspect of the President's Peace Through Strength strategy.
Here are some more of President Reagan's personal items, including his riding boots he used to wear on his ranch, and Mr. and Mrs. Reagan personalized jackets from Camp David. Here's a 3D map of where we're at right now, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. Here's Ronald Reagan's funeral from 2004.
The nation mourns the passing of a president tonight. Ronald Reagan, surrounded by his family, died at his home in California today after a long service.
With faith in Jesus Christ, we receive the body of our brother Ronald for burial. Let's pray with confidence to God, the giver of life.
To pass that dream of freedom on to a waiting and a hopeful world.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Mr. Reagan was making his first public appearance since the shooting.
Well, we're coming to the end of this amazing museum. It's quite a life, from a young lifeguard to a sportscaster to a movie star to the governor of California to the president. And now let's go look in the souvenir shop. There really is a lot of cool and interesting things in here. There's busts of the president. Of course, there's bobbleheads, not only of Reagan, but of the Statue of Liberty and Uncle Sam as well. Ronald Reagan Presidential Library jackets, phone covers, hats, jackets, mugs. Ronald Reagan Christmas ornaments, Santa Claus and Air Force One. Why not? Give the reindeer a friggin' break every once in a while. Ronald Reagan Presidential Library pencils. It makes sense to have lots of jelly beans, as Ronald Reagan is known to have been a big jelly bean fan. That's cool. I see Jelly Belly even made a special Ronald Reagan tribute pack. And of course, as any good shop would have, there's plenty of books. And of course, the great American pastime, baseball. There's Ronald Reagan Presidential Library mini baseball bats and baseballs. And they have a good selection of t-shirts and sweatshirts.
That's a good book, by the way. A little bit of history with the National Scrolls. I like the National Scrolls.
Listen, I can't go anywhere without mine. I've got the progressive, so I've got the black bubbles down here. I gotta get mine out. That's why we got these. We're not used to it.
And that's 25-30.
Mom, ask her if they have the small black pins.
That's all black hat, the smaller one is over that. Is that like yours? Yeah, it's pretty small, it's over there.
Okay, and you get
Did you see that, the
$4.85 back.
second stand? Yeah, this is the one.
Yeah, not bad, huh?
Yeah, they're about the same size. It's less than an inch.
75-85
That's not a pen, that's a pocket. The pin is over there, and that's just the smallest.
Really? It's kind of nice, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you.
We're almost done, but there's just a couple more things we want to check out real quick. First is this real piece of the Berlin Wall out here.
Wipe out!
Oh, sorry, I thought the Beach Boys were here. Turns out just a woman was laughing. And the one other thing that I wanted to check out before leaving is another restaurant called the Gipper's Bar and Bistro. Well, that's all from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. I thought it was amazing. I hope you liked it as well. See you next time.